Good morning, everyone. Now it's a cold, rainy morning, and we are at home with my wife. You'll hear some clicking noises in the background, and that's her working, and I'm working, and we're having some coffee. And today we're gonna talk about Göbeklitepe. You know, I live in Turkey, and Göbeklitepe is one of the star attractions of Turkish tourism recently. It's this very, very ancient and groundbreaking stone temple, 6,000 years older than Stonehenge itself, which puts it at around 11,000 years old. And it's really a mystifying sight, full of T-shaped stone pillars, weird sculptures, designs of animals and humans. And as you might expect from such a discovery, it's been the subject of a field day for scientific and conspiratorial theories about its origin, purpose, who built it, what it was used for, so on and so forth. Now, this podcast has been on my mind for a while, and as it kind of matured in my thoughts, new discoveries emerged, which have contributed to what I'm about to say now. So, as I just told, there are a number of weird conspiracy theories about what this place was. I mean, if you go online and look at these alternative media or alternative consciousness websites, it's been hailed as anything from an ancient temple of Osiris, like a precursor site for Noah before the arrival of the flood. And there are some, this is very funny, both Turkish and Armenian sources claim it was built by Proto-Turks or Proto-Armenians, and of course Kurdish people have also said this is proof that an ancient Kurdish mega civilization existed in the region, but hey, let's not go there. So, in reality, only a few certain things can be said about Göbeklitepe, though. I mean, let's briefly go over what we know. It's a site of 3 or maybe more concentric circles made out of T-shaped columns, and if we look at them from the sky, they look a bit like pizza slices, you know, with the T's radiating towards the center. And I think it's likely that the places between the pillars were somehow walled in, and there was a roof over the entire structure. And as I told, these stone pillars were decorated very richly, and they are very fantastically lavish engravings of very crude, stylized birds, lions, scorpions, snakes, something that has been called a salamander, but it looks like a weird toad or a lizard, I don't know. Some of the pillars themselves seem to be in the shapes of extremely stylized human figures. One has got 2 arms on the side, for example. Another has this very delightfully stylized shape of a fox. And, you know, it's an enigma. In addition to these, there are many small figures found around the site. The biggest of these is the so-called Urfa man, which is just this almost life-size, tall man with very haunting, dark, ingressed eyes, and as naturally as you might expect, he's clutching his own genitals, because it seems that masculinity was a very prominent symbol here. For example, there are forms of leaping lions, and in them all, we can see the penises are extremely prominent. And this is not because Göbeklitepe had anything special going on. It's just how these things were always depicted in the past. If you go to France and look at some of the oldest cave paintings, you see genitals are very prominent there in depictions of man. I guess ancient people were rather proud of that thing. You know, they weren't pusillanimous like we have become in our society. But anyways, then there are also a lot of small figures, and you know, not many people can make quite a lot of sense out of those. There seemed to be something like a figure with a leopard on his back or her back, nobody can tell. And then there are like these little stone heads with stripes across the domes of their skulls, and it's very strange. And what were they doing there? And of course, especially in the country it's been found in, these were interpreted very openly and with such admiration, and they really cherished them. And one of my friends who went there recently claimed that, "How it's so pagan!" But of course, that's not the definition of the word pagan, but that was the only matching word she could find in her reservoir of knowledge. It's so feminine, it's so pagan. There was like, of course, in the big cities of Turkey, where Göbeklitepe is located, there's as you might expect from any urbanized society, there's a growing green, ecological, pro-female, nurturing movement. You know, these attitudes that it's kind of like veganism, feminism, kindness to animals, which are good. Then it telescopes into the questionable ends like anti-vaccine, and I'm not even going to go there, but you know, this thing exists in Turkey, it exists in many parts of the modern world, and they really latched onto this idea of Göbeklitepe being this kind of dream society where they were not farming. And this is true actually. It seems that really Göbeklitepe was built by hunter-gatherers, and it was assumed in the past that hunter-gatherers could not really have the organization to build such things. You know, they just hunted and gathered, and they wore like fur shorts and had big wooden clubs and just hunted and gathered. But obviously now we know that partially through Göbeklitepe, that this transition from hunter-gatherers to farms was extremely more complicated. And I guess, you know, you're going to give hunter-gatherers more credit than they have been given so far. And they could build those things, and maybe seasonally they could pool such resources to stay in these places for a time, and, you know, so that's true. I mean, people in Göbeklitepe were hunter-gatherers. Now, whether they were like a positive, nurturing, one with nature, pro-feminine society is extremely disputable. And by the way, I'm not saying this in a debative way, because the evidence indicates that, I mean, most depictions of people you could make sense of from Göbeklitepe are those of men. Okay, that's not evidence of any masculine bias, but you know, these people did not leave any texts behind, so we can only guess from these little artifacts. But there's one more thing, and this is what I'm getting at. So around 2017, new discoveries from Göbeklitepe indicated that there was a special treatment of certain individuals going on. And what's the special treatment, you might ask, you know? And it was the evidence of a skull cult. So certain individuals were specially treated by having one or more holes dug into their skulls, and they were hung up. The skulls were almost certainly hung up by a cord or something for display. Or now, whether this is just the heads hanging from a stone totem, you know, delightfully decorated with fancy animal patterns, or whether it was like an entire freaking body, you know, we could debate this. But more and more evidence from Göbeklitepe indicates that there was a bloody skull cult going on here. And you know, hunter-gatherers, they are not like these blue people you see in Avatar, you know. No, hunter-gatherers, even in the present day, have some of the most highest rates of violent death for men and women in their societies. You look at Papua New Guinea, like everybody's like, he insulted somebody's uncle in another village, or maybe sometimes they just even walk in the wrong territory and it's okay to kill them. And if you watch these series about these biker guys, what was the name?
Sons of Anarchy.
Sons of Anarchy, that's the name. So you see how without the benefit of a protecting settled society, violence was an okay and perhaps the only way to bring order in these societies. And people in Göbeklitepe seem to have relished in violence. In fact, if you look at this archaeological presentation put together by archaeologists working in Göbeklitepe, and these are like real archaeologists, you know, not like Atlantist types or irredentist nationalists, or, you know, they really study the thing. Okay, they say that all of the elements we know so far indicated that this was the site where a sense of violent tribal group identity was forged, you know. So you had exclusion from exterior elements, you know, the temples with the covering over the top, in between the pillars, whatever. There were elements of fear, aggression, and death, you know. Skulls and dead bodies were like hung up for display all over the place. And you know, all those fancy pictures of animals you saw on the pillars, all the birds, nature one together. Yeah, they were all probably killed and like stacked together in a big bloody larder, a big bloody feast. It's like apocalypse now. You know, these people are like killing people, killing animals, putting them all together and possibly eating them. But let's go back to the other elements. There's, according to Gobeklitepe archaeologists, there's plenty of evidence for male iconography. I just described you all the phallic imagery, and yeah, we're men, we're standing around. And maybe there's evidence for body modifications, they say, and this inference they base on discoveries of these little stone heads, you know, little stone head sculptures that with little stripes over there. But maybe that's just the symbol of a dead enemy head, a dead person from another tribe. And these, they claim, are all the necessary ingredients for the forging of a violent group identity at Göbeklitepe. And, you know, maybe you need reminding that ancient people were extremely violent. And it is actually true that most hunter-gathering societies did not differentiate from, you know, they say, animals and people, they were all one. They did not differentiate. Yeah, and they killed both animals and people with equal impunity. You know, a hunter-gatherer from tribe A at Göbeklitepe would not give two figs about like cutting the throat of a captive from another tribe. You know, he would care as little as a farmer cared about the chickens he was slaughtering in the present day. And that's not because, I mean, they were inherently violent. That's just how people got by those days. Because remember, there was no police force, there were no taxes, there were no laws. You know, you had to be the judge and the executioner. And if you decided that wasn't your game, here somebody else came and killed you. At point, there's like this discovery. Let me just Google it. Wait, baboon sacrifice prehistoric. Let me. Oh, okay. So this is an article from New York Times. Prehistoric man's killing of 90 giant baboons suggests early ritual. So in where was this? A scientist from Johns Hopkins University discovered in where I believe is North Africa, in a place called Olorgesailie in Kenya, yes. They discovered 90 dead giant baboons. And these were not like the baboons, they were like huge, the size of a bear. And, you know, one by one, they were killed and laid to rest in a certain area. And it looks like whoever did the killing didn't eat them either. This is how mankind became the master of the world. This is through killing, through indiscriminate killing, through genocide in most cases, to our specific. Cannibalism was a big part. There's no denying that. So, like, imagine, like, take one of us today on YouTube, okay? You're put, let alone people, they give you one baboon, they say you should kill this. I mean, I would have extreme difficulty doing this because I would feel empathy. Prehistoric man, no such qualms. Chat, 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 bish, bash, bosh. Murder all the time. What I'm getting at through this and the things we find in Göbeklitepe is that just at the cusp of settled agrarian societies, I believe people experienced a revolution. It was not a revolution in architecture. It was not a revolution in society building or hunter-gathering. No, it was an understanding that they could pretty much kill and eat anything and everything, and this included other people, this included other tribes, all the animals. Now I'm going to open a parenthesis in science fiction. There's a book called Downwards to Earth by Silverberg. What's the name? Science fiction author. I'm just going back to the computer to Google it. Wait, Robert Silverberg. Yeah, that's the name. So Robert Silverberg wrote, he's a phenomenal science fiction writer, by the way, because like all the best science fiction writers, his ideas are derived from human psychology and what happens to people. And the world building that follows is just a delightful accessory. But anyways, in this book, a man arrives at this decaying colonial planet inhabited by elephant-like peaceful aliens, and this decaying colonial administration, and something seems to be happening that it's like, it's a huge head trip. There's a place where two people go to a forest and they play electric guitars to alien snakes and milk their venom juice for a drug. It's a great psychedelic story. But at one point in this book, the narrator observes the supposedly peaceful elephant creatures in a ritual. And what they do is they build this corral kind of thing. And they bring in all the like alien gazelles, alien birds, other like alien animals which they have been peacefully living together with so far in the story. And then something happens and they go crazy and the elephants start killing all the other animals, other alien animals, in an orgy of violence. And it's really awful to read. Like, you feel sick when you're reading it. And they really relish in this violence. It's like this, really grisly, and they kill just for the sake of killing, and they experience an almost sexual sort of joy. And this is how they justify their pleasant, calm, and peaceful demeanor throughout the other times of the year. Now, I believe, without any supporting evidence, that something like this might have been going on Göbeklitepe. So, far from like the site of civilization, the birthplace of settled civilization, or a feminine nurturing society, Göbeklitepe was actually, if you went there, it would feel like Apocalypse Now, or this horror movie called Event Horizon, or it would be like so dark and bloody that not even the deepest reaches of our present day civilized subconscious would be able to justify it, And if I was an alien and I visited the earth at those times, and you look down, it's 11,000 BC or whatever. And there's this region. Oh, by the way, Göbeklitepe was not the first temple where this thing happened. Before concluding, I'm going to open a parenthesis. Göbeklitepe was the biggest discovered so far, but it would be only stupid to assume that this was the first or the best place. No, it's just the biggest place we've discovered so far. And actually, throughout Mesopotamia, there are similar sites with T-shaped pillars. So, this shit was going on in a lot of different places. Okay, so you're an alien and you come to planet Earth in 11,000 BC or whatever, and there's this region between a land between two rivers, and it's full of these like upright apes, and they're walking about, and then they're building these like stupid sculptures, and they're like killing each other, killing all the animals, having these death meat orgies, and you would say, what do we do with these sick bastards? And to quote from Aliens, I know what I would do. If I saw a planet at the cusp of this revolution, it would be like, catching a cancer at the earliest site of development. And the answer, at least to me, is pretty obvious. We take off, we nuke the site from orbit. That's it. Okay, guys, so this was my ideas about Göbeklitepe, and through this evidence of the skull cult, and below the description I'm including all sorts of references for you to look and see, including the official blog of the Göbeklitepe archaeological community, the paper that first describes the skull cult, and so on and so forth. You can read more about this. And the final where I suggested exterminating any such society, maybe that was a bit of a hyperbole, but hey, I'm a human being, I was excited. But what do you think Göbeklitepe was? Let's talk about this in the comment section. And also, I'm on Patreon. Now, thank heavens, Patreon is not my only source of income, but it really helps. And last month, you good guys at YouTube and all my other friends, you donated $50 to me. And this was a good price, because $50 becomes something like 250 of my own currency, which can take care of me for, at least for my, lunch money and all that, for more than 2 weeks. So that's good. So please keep supporting me through Patreon. The link is below. And as always, have a nice day. Please remember that all of our civilized activities, they stand on the shoulders of really bloody and cruel past practices. And if you understand this, then you realize that some of the comforts of life, and I'm bored at work. Yeah, would you be doing anything else? Anyways, that was my morale. Or maybe there's no morale. Please support me. Let's talk about Göbeklitepe and have a nice day. Goodbye.